Do you really need an estate plan? You might have some documents in place that talk about what happens if you pass prematurely. You might have gotten those when you had children, and they may be a little outdated now. So, is it okay to just keep those, or should you go and have those redone? That's what we're going to talk about here today. Guys, welcome to the show. If it's your first time here, my name is Tiago Gleeger. We help federal employees grow, manage, and protect their wealth through a variety of financial planning techniques, talking about what's going on in the markets and conversations around taxes, and stuff about estate planning, which is what we're going to talk about today. So stick around, let's jump right to it. We don't like talking about death, almost superstitiously, but if you think about it, you probably have some goals for your money after you're gone, just like you have them for when you're around and kicking. Estate planning is one of those things where people think it's so far down the road, and unfortunately, a lot of people wait until it's too late, and things happen to their assets that they didn't have control over, or maybe they would have handled it a little bit differently. And so that's what estate planning is about. You can get a lot of things done with an attorney and with a planner to make sure that you can sleep well at night, knowing everything will be taken care of. Okay, so let's back up for 1 second. By the time you go talk to an estate attorney, you should already have a plan in place. Estate attorneys are the experts at the how, not necessarily at the what. Now, in our time overseeing the wealth of families, estate planning has, time and time again, been one of the strongest components of guiding and maintaining safety over the wealth of the family. So we've had experience guiding people through this conversation on a more strategic level where the estate attorney comes in with the tactics. And it's my experience that if you take a step back from this whole process and try not to think about the fact that you're creating legal documents for the end of your life, but rather, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind, and what do you want to be remembered for? You'll find that that's a much more approachable method of accomplishing this task. Now, you might be thinking it's only the multi-millionaire families that need estate planning, and that's just not true. So estate planning can be one of those components that can potentially reduce and actually, in certain cases, eliminate all estate taxes so that you can keep that wealth in the family. Now, because somebody's going to mention it, the current estate exemption level is $11 million, okay? Now, it was not always $11 million, and we would be naive to think that it will remain at that level. How long is that protection going to last for? Is it going to continue to protect your home and other types of assets from your family and from taxation? We just don't know what the future holds, and so getting these documents in place can help you be prepared for that. In the face of a changing tax environment that we may see coming up, the millionaires next door, as I like to call them, are made aware by the fact that perhaps they may not be as protected as they thought they were. Another reason for having estate documents is because it can help keep you out of probate. If you have encountered probate with a family member, you know that it's a long, agonizing process, and it's very public. We've all heard the stories of celebrities and rock stars and the planning fails that they had in their estate planning after they've passed. That's not something you want for your family. That's not something you want for your wealth. Keep it out of the public eye, whether for ridicule or jeopardy because of a liability or a lawsuit or something. Just do the planning ahead of time. It's going to save a lot of heartache in the end. If you fail to make a formal estate plan and put it in writing, the state has a fallback plan. If there are assets that are not guided by that estate plan, you give up your rights in determining how those assets are going to be handled, and the state law is going to be applicable at the time. One less common reason for estate planning, but equally as important, is so that you're protected from legal suits or liabilities. So, ERISA retirement plans or IRAs, even in themselves, are a form of trust, so they are protected from the liability of creditors. Your other assets, however, don't have that same luxury, and you have to create that plan around it to offer it that protection. And estate planning should actually be exciting. I know it sounds crazy, but it's an opportunity for you to make decisions about the legacy that you're leaving for your family and for your community while you're still of sound mind. Just remember, this is not an overnight process. There's going to be a time in your life where you're either no longer able to make decisions or you're not around to make them. And you'll want to make sure that there's a legal document in place that you've thought through. And I want you to ask yourself these questions. Who will handle your financial affairs if you become incapacitated? Can your spouse handle these responsibilities? Do they have the wherewithal after having experienced a loss? Do they have the technical expertise in dealing with investments and portfolios and working with the estate attorneys? Right? Who is going to raise your children if you're not around? Do you want the person that's dealing with the economics to be the same person that's raising your children? So there's a lot of questions here that you have to think through first, right? As you start to develop a plan, and then you can go to an estate attorney and say, make it so, Sulu. So let's discuss your children for a second. If they're inheriting the pool of money that you've accumulated, have you considered how that's going to be split? Have you considered when they're going to get those assets? What are they to do with it? If they're younger, can you entrust them to make smart decisions about that money that they just came into, right? Or do you need to have something in place offering them some guidelines? Having some control beyond your life is possible. Maybe you want to instill some stewardship principles or some philanthropic principles that maybe you just didn't have the time because perhaps your life ended prior to you getting to that moment in life. Maybe they weren't old enough. This is a place that you can do those. Sometimes estate planning can be used to guide children regardless of their age. Perhaps they become subject to outside influence, right? Or there's another element that some families use what's called a special needs trust. Now, there's a variety of reasons to set up a trust like that, but for instance, we worked with a family that chose to do this for their diabetic child so that they could help cover some of those medical costs even beyond when they were no longer around to be able to help them. So even even when their child was an adult. And so if that is set up properly, that the assets that are titled to that can be protected from Medicaid. And so if the person becomes eligible for Medicaid at that point, assets to their name may preclude them from getting that benefit. So this type of trust can actually be a very helpful tool in a circumstance like that. So you can see there's a lot, almost an unlimited amount of planning places that you can go with estate planning. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the different types of estate planning documents that you might see. If you go in to retain an attorney, telling them that this is your goal, they're probably going to present you with a package. Okay, and in there contains usually a last testament and will. There's going to be some sort of financial power of attorney. There's also advanced medical directives, a health proxy. Those are all important documents for your end of life or any incapacitation that happens during your life as well. For most people, that about covers the majority of their needs. If we're talking about getting into trusts and some more complex issues involving estate planning, it can get a little more expensive. And so just don't get carried away, right? It's not the place to be, penny smart and pound foolish, but at the same time, don't buy more than you need. That's why I say it's important for you to have a plan first before you go and talk to an estate attorney. And one quick note about trusts. So I have lost count how many times we've encountered this situation before. Just having a trust document, okay, that outlines the assets does not mean that the job is done. What do I mean by that? When the trust document is ready, now you have to actually retitle and re-register every asset that needs to fall under the trust, because until you do so, those assets are not protected by those legal documents. And this is a step that very, very, very few people actually remember to do. They get their legal documents, they're excited, they forget to title all of the assets into trust, which now they are official, right? But not prior to that happening. Okay, so now let's say you already have some legal documents in place. Review them. This is a perfect time to go back and check. Do they need to be updated? Are there new little people in your life? Maybe there are grandchildren now running around. Most people we work with, when we look over their estate documents, they still have language about who's going to raise their kids, right? And now their kids may be 30 and 40 years old at this point. And so you have to update that. You have to keep it polished, right? Because laws have changed, lives have changed. A lot of things move during the course of your life. And that's one of those documents that you just want to make sure you're keeping up to date as well. So if you have absolutely nothing today and you're really not planning, you haven't gone through the process of thinking all of these things through, I recommend you at least get what I like to call a Band-Aid will. So these can be found online for relatively cheaply. You put in the state that you live in and some things that you want to do, and they will publish this boilerplate language document for you. Something is better than nothing, but this is not a replacement for real estate documents. Something else you need to do is that regardless of what your estate document said, beneficiaries that are listed on your insurance accounts, right, your insurance policies, your TSP, IRAs, even individual accounts that are considered TOD or POD, transfer on death, or payable on death, beneficiaries listed on any of those types of accounts actually supersede an estate document. You should also brush up on your federal benefits and the elections you make at retirement and how they are impacted upon your death, especially if your death happens prior to your spouse's death, right? Some of these things are probably not going to make it into your estate documents and legal docs, but it's still part of the estate planning process. It's still an important variable for you to consider. Something else you might consider is writing a letter to your family while you're still of sound mind. And, while this isn't something that's legally necessary for your estate planning, it's still an important part, I find. In this letter, you can talk about how much you love your family and how much you care about them and why you're making the decisions that you're making and, what are the things that you want for each of them. And you can do these things in your own voice and not necessarily in the legalese that's going to be your estate planning documents. Really, it's a love letter to them, but it's more than that. You might also consider in that same letter putting some usernames and passwords. Don't tell your IT person that I said that. But things that you feel are going to be important, that you deem necessary, maybe for just making their lives a little easier in the future. And as you start to get these affairs in order, I recommend that you get the right professionals in place. In my opinion, it's a planner and an estate attorney, creation and execution, to help guide you make these decisions and help affect this into plan. The right team behind you generally gets you to your goals in the most efficient way possible. We can't predict the future, but you can achieve your goals for tomorrow whether you're there to see it or not. Don't leave it up to chance alone. After all, it's not just your money, it's your future. Guys, that's all we have for today. If you enjoyed this topic and things like this, you're interested in learning more about how we're helping federal employees grow, manage, and protect their wealth, make sure you hit the subscribe button somewhere on this screen here and hit that bell icon. It's going to give you a notification so that you know the next time we put out a video like this. Stick around. We'll see you next time.